So guys, it's Matt B. I review running shoes here on YouTube, and today we're going to be talking about the SAUCONY KINVARA PRO. Now I want you to keep an open mind with this shoe. I want you to curb your expectations, and I think this is going to be done best if we ignore two words, the word Kinvara and the word Pro. Let's get into it. Let's get started with those disclosures. Saucony was good enough to send me the KINVARA PRO for the purpose of review. However, they've got no editorial input and they won't get a chance to see this video before you do here on YouTube. With that said, the SAUCONY KINVARA PRO will cost you $180. So right off the bat, I think that price actually describes where this shoe is going to fit into the pantheon of shoes. It's not cheap enough to be just a daily trainer, but it's not expensive enough to be a race day shoe. So it's right there in the middle, which we're going to call the super trainer category. Okay, the KINVARA PRO is a max cushion shoe. We have 42mm in the heel, 34 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. Saucony claims that a US men's size 9 will tip the scale at 9.5 ounces or 269 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it weighs in at 12 ounces or 341 grams. Okay, remember those two words that I wanted you to forget about when you're thinking about this shoe, KINVARA and Pro? That's because if you are a fan of the KINVARA, this shoe bears no resemblance to the original KINVARA. Right here I have the KINVARA 14, and yes, I suppose there are a few aesthetic features that are similar, but if you get both these shoes in your hands, you're going to see that the regular KINVARA, the KINVARA 14, is way lighter than the KINVARA Pro. And remember how the KINVARA 14 is a light, soft ride, almost like a more traditional running shoe. The KINVARA Pro totally separates you from the ground. There is no ground feel when you have 42mm in the heel and 34 in the forefoot. But this isn't a comparison between the KINVARA and the KINVARA Pro because they really don't compare. So let's just talk about the shoe at hand, the KINVARA Pro. And of course, we'll start at the top and we'll work our way down. Guys, the heel counter on this shoe is super rigid. I mean, you are not pushing that down in a million years. Now we do have this little pull tab here on the back. It's elasticated, but it sits tight against the heel counter of the shoe. And then the heel collar is, I think, traditionally Saucony. It's kind of like a medium in thickness. It's not overly padded like we see in daily trainers, but it's not super wispy like that we see on race day shoes. The upper is a fairly breathable engineered mesh, and we've got kind of like raised rubber accents, almost like a fingerprint over it. But all in all, I can't complain about the breathability. It is super light, not as light as the KINVARA 14, but it's still very light. I didn't run into any issues where my feet were getting hot. It's actually very light and breathable. As far as the tongue goes, it's like smack dab in the middle of where thicknesses of tongues lie. It's not that super single layer of felt, and it's not a super plush tongue that we see on some daily trainers. It's right there in the middle. Now, there's no lace loop, but the tongue is gusseted, and I didn't experience any tongue migration when I had the shoe locked in. Now, speaking of locking my foot in, the shoe fit absolutely fantastic, and while I'm talking about sizing and fit, the shoe does fit true to size. But this is very typical for me. Do you see how the eyelet chains are quite close together here? This is how most Saucony shoes fit me. So perhaps compared with some other brands, there is a little more volume in the upper of Saucony shoes. However, this is just aesthetics. The shoe fit me like a dream. I didn't run into any issues. There were no hot spots. I had a great heel lockdown, which isn't surprising because of this rigid heel counter, and I had plenty of room in the toe box. Now, as far as overlays go, well, I said overlays. Let's talk about underlays. This is very similar to the KINVARA. We have a raised underlay right around the toes just to keep that upper off your toes. Obviously, we've got the branding here on the lateral and medial side, and then we've got this faux suede accent, which is just like the KINVARA 14. And yes, it is faux suede. The KINVARA Pro are vegan. And then again, we got a little more suede accents on the back. As far as the reinforcements on the eyelet chain, they're very small. They're just around the little eyelets. There's no overlay covering the entire chain. But that's it. It's kind of like a maximalist, minimalist shoe. There's not a lot going on here at the upper. Then the upper actually works very well. Okay, now let's talk about the midsole. But before we talk about the midsole, I kind of feel like maybe I've been a little negative, or I've been leading you in a negative way with a review of the KINVARA Pro. Guys, let me just stop right here and tell you that the KINVARA Pro feels fantastic, and it is an excellent shoe. But it's an excellent shoe in its own right. And the reason I wanted you to forget about the words KINVARA and Pro is because if you think about the KINVARA and you think about what you had with a KINVARA 14, or if you think about a pro level shoe, we think of race day shoe, we think light, we think snappy. I think if you have those expectations, probably going to be disappointed in the KINVARA Pro. However, if you go in with an open mind and you take this shoe for what it is, it's actually a very good shoe, and it feels great underfoot. I actually can't complain about anything about this shoe. But once again, for the last time, check your expectations at the door. You will be happy with this. Now let's talk about the midsole, because as in every shoe, the midsole is where the magic happens. Saucony is using 3 foams on the KINVARA Pro. First of all, in the sock liner, now the sock liner is removable, but we're using Power Run Plus, okay? tuck that right back in. Now we've got a top layer right here of Power Run PB. And Power Run PB, as you know, is a very responsive, a very soft foam. And then here on the bottom, we have regular Power Run. Now, Power Run is a little firmer formulation, but sandwiched in between this Power Run PB on the top and Power Run on the bottom, we have a 3/4 length carbon fiber plate. And you can see there is a little window in the bottom with the carbon plate peeking through. Always love to see that. We'll come back down to the bottom in a second. And this trio of foams actually goes together quite well. Obviously, what Saucony is going for is a nice, soft, plush step-in feel. And then we've got this firmer foam on the bottom to make the shoe feel a little more responsive. And then, of course, they've thrown in the carbon fiber plate to potentially give it a little more pop. Okay, that's the midsole and the insole, but let's come down to the outsole. And you will notice that there is none. There is no outsole rubber here. We just have exposed Power Run foam. And I actually don't hate it. And if you are wondering why my shoes look so clean, I did wash the bottom before I made this video. So even though we don't have any outsole rubber, I didn't experience any issues with grip. I did run on wet pavement. It gripped just fine. And I think maybe in this case, the outsole rubber would have made the shoe a little slappy. Maybe it would make it feel a little too firm. But because they went without it, I think that softened up the ride just a little bit. The only downside to not having outsole rubber is longevity, durability. And when you don't have rubber, when you just have midsole foam, that is a valid concern. Exposed midsole outsoles just don't last as long. And this is going to be no exception. Although up on my forefoot, I'm actually not noticing very much wear at all. Yeah, I can see some scuffing, but it actually looks pretty good. But when I come back here to my lateral heel edge, I am starting to see quite a bit of wear already. And as of making this video, I have about 40 miles in this shoe, a little over 40 miles. So obviously not a lot of volume in these shoes, but I am seeing quite a bit of wear already. But that's really neither here nor there. They haven't put any rubber on it, so you're not going to be expecting this shoe to last you 1,000 miles. I think as far as longevity goes, it is going to be below average in longevity and durability, but perhaps that's not going to matter to you if this shoe ticks the other boxes of what you're looking for in a running shoe. Okay, let's talk about ride, because this is the most important part. Well, probably right behind price and specs. No, I think the ride comes before specs, so price, ride, specs. Anyway, the ride was very satisfying. Now, I do tend to prefer a softer ride. I love the Endorphin Pro 3 with that full slab of Power Run PB. It just feels nice and soft and responsive. And with this layer of Power Run right on the bottom, some may say it's a firm ride. And yes, I guess saying it's a firm ride, that's definitely a subjective statement because you are judging it against other shoes that you've run in. I happen to have run in a lot of shoes that were remarkably firmer than the Kinvara Pro. So while I did find this firmer than, let's say, the New Balance SC Trainer V2, which is like super squishy, and the Endorphin Pro 3, yeah, if I compare it to those, the Kinvara Pro's midsole and ride are quite firm. But it's actually a forgiving firmness. It's actually quite a treat to run in. And not once on any of my runs that I've done in the Kinvara Pro did I think, oh, this is getting a little tiring, my feet are getting beat up. I never thought I needed to stop because my feet didn't feel good, which is sometimes how I feel when I run in firmer shoes. In fact, I would say that I could quite happily run for hours in the Kinvara Pro. It felt that good. Okay, remember we said we've got this 3/4 length carbon fiber plate running from the toe down to about here, I guess. Well, you know what 3/4 is. But that carbon fiber plate does make this a very stiff shoe. I'm having a very difficult time just bending that up. And okay, one more comparison to the regular Kinvara. This shoe is like a wet noodle. Like, it's like a slipper. You just bend this up and tuck it in your pocket. Anyway, the Kinvara Pro is not like that. Super rigid, so if you don't like that rigidity, perhaps you may not like it, or maybe you like a rigid shoe when you're racing. I think a lot of us do. We generally like the snap that comes with a more rigid shoe. However, that wasn't my experience running in the Kinvara Pro. I didn't find this shoe snappy at all. Now, as far as training in the shoe goes, I went out for a lot of easy miles. On those easy miles, I did surges, I did pickups, I did one interval workout in the Kinvara Pro, and yeah, they felt good. They felt good, but it felt like I was kind of putting in a bit of an effort to really get my feet turning over. You know how on some carbon fiber plated race shoes, it feels like the shoes are giving you an assist. It feels like they're almost moving you forward. I didn't get that feeling in the Kinvara Pro. But Saucony is using their speed roll technology, which is just their rocker-shaped geometry, and that's what I noticed was kind of helping me along. So I know it's impossible to separate the two, the geometry from the carbon fiber plate, but in my personal subjective feelings, I thought the speed roll, the geometry, was the deciding factor in what made the ride really nice, not the carbon fiber plate. Now, the carbon fiber plate did give this a very stable ride. Now, this is not a stability shoe, but it's a neutral trainer that rides stable. Does that make sense? I mean, we've got this carbon fiber plate in it that is going to make it a little more stable. And if I hold it up and we see how wide this base is, look at that. That's a nice wide platform. There was no wobbling. Remember, 42, 34, this is a pretty high stack height shoe. In some other shoes with this stack height, you might think that you're in danger of rolling an ankle. Not so with the Kinvara Pro. Super stable underfoot. I loved it. So who do I think this shoe is for? Now, I keep going back to it, not being a Kinvara and not being a pro, but if you've made it to this point in the video, I think you're open to new things, maybe a reinterpretation of what a Kinvara is, and maybe what a pro is. Maybe this is the pro level of the Kinvara. And if we think about it that way, I think maybe the Kinvara Pro is a pretty appropriate name because the shoe fits well, it feels very good underfoot, it's a little firmer than maybe the softest shoes, but not as firm as the firmest shoes. I know I'm leaving myself a lot of room to hedge my bets here. It's a very stable ride, and we've got that carbon fiber plate, which even though I didn't feel it giving my stride a pop, it's likely that I have been spoiled by other shoes. So in a nutshell, if you are someone that likes to run marathons, half marathons, you don't want to spend the money on a race day shoe, I think the Kinvara Pro is a nice middle ground. And it's actually going to be a great shoe for you because it's comfortable, it's stable, and it will perform better at a race than, let's say, a daily trainer. So yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with this shoe. Now, it did take me quite a while, several months, to get this shoe in hand and run it through its paces, and I feel like this shoe hasn't been accepted by the running community for who it truly is. Because there is a place for this shoe. Hey, I'll tell you what I really would like, and honestly, if you are still here at this point in the video, then this has to stay between us, but I would like to rename this as the Saucony Endorphin Shift. And the Shift that is out there right now, I don't care if I never run another mile in that shoe, but I would love to see this as the Endorphin Shift. What do you think? Oh, and on the other hand, if you are looking for something, I know $180 is quite expensive, but if you are looking for something a little softer, maybe a shoe with a little more pop, then I would always encourage you to still reach out for the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. Always a good option. I would say the Speed 3 is faster than the Kinvara Pro, but honestly, the rides are totally different. So, like always, it depends what you're looking for. So with that, I realized that I may have left you with more questions than you had before you actually started watching this video. So go ahead and drop a comment if you have any, and I will respond to every single one. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the Saucony Kinvara Pro. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.